Welcome to the afternoon session of the BOCC. My understanding is we need to start this with the executive session because we have somebody online and it's potential litigation. And we think about 5 minutes. Okay, so let's get that taken care of.
The board is extending the executive session an additional 5 minutes until 1:43 PM. The board is extending the executive session an additional 5 minutes until 1:48 PM.
Okay, we're back from executive session. No decisions were made. Oh, Jessica, did you want to do something real quick? I know you're on a time frame.
Thank you. Jessica Warren, Human Resources. We have a request from Corrections, a request to fill one of their support specialist positions has put in her notice. Her last day will be November 3rd, so we would like to fill her position.
What kind of a job is that? Support specialist?
Marin Fox, Director of Corrections. It's the front desk.
Oh,
This particular position is our front desk, the person you see when you walk into our lobby.
well,
I don't see any
that's
objections.
appropriate.
And since I've met Marin's sister, she's a nice one. We're okay with that.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Kelly, are you able to promote me? You able to promote me?
Okay,
Okay, we're going to get started with our budget workshop. This is our third workshop. Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director. I'm here to support the effort here. And then I just wanted to let you know that in your handouts, we've done some pie charts for you on 2022 and 2021. The budget as well as the actuals, because those 2 years are closed. And by function, to let you know how everything looked. That was something I think y'all had requested, and so that's now in your books. And we are going to be on tab number 8 for starting today with the jails. Corrections.
So the pie charts at the very beginning, general fund only, or is it the
General
entire
fund
budget?
only. They're
Okay, so it's
only
fund.
general fund only.
And I think in the past, Lauren will remember that the public safety sector was in the 70% plus.
And right
But
now,
what I'm thinking is the difference is the ARPA monies have changed those totals around because ARPA is coming through the general fund.
yeah, but I don't think that, I don't know for 20, I wasn't here 21 or 22, but I can verify that, but yeah, it is just the general fund, and it would be impacted if it had a transfer in from ARPA.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
We'll get started. All right, turn it over to Maureen.
In your materials, you should have a narrative that I supplied. It covers the jail budget as well as offender services, probation, and concessions. There aren't a lot of large changes in any of them. I'll start with the jail budget. For 2024, it's actually a decrease from the jail budget for 2023. And I'll go through the notable changes. In the food budget, I put in a request for an increase of $40,000. That is just due to increased population and meal cost, the meal prices going up in the next year. And in drugs, which really should say pharmaceuticals, not drugs. That's what's, it's an increase of 48,000 to go to 300,000 for that line item. That is also due to increased population and some increased medication costs. We're seeing more injectable medication, which is very effective, but costs more. In professional services, and let me give you a little background on what professional services is. That's changed over the years, but right now it includes things like our Spillman subscription, our yearly cost for that, costs for shredding, costs for polygraph and psychological evaluations, that sort of thing. And that used to include our outside medical care. And we've shifted that into the next one. I'm going to talk about the jail medical. But we've also seen a pretty significant decrease in the costs for outside medical care. Previous to COVID, I think we were around the $450,000 mark for that line item, and it's much, much lower than that now. So in professional services, it's a decrease of 440,000. Some of that is added back into the next line item, which is jail medical. That includes the NAVCare contract. That's the bulk of that line item. And then it will include outside medical care as well. So that increase is shifting some of those funds from professional services into jail medical, and then also the increase associated with the contract with NAVCare. And outside medical care can mean off-site visits, so hospital, dentist, that sort of thing. In utilities, there's a combined increase between City of Longview, gas and solid waste of a little over 35,000. And we did have
That
one,
looks like about a 12% increase.
I'm sorry,
That looks like about a 12% increase over the previous year. 300,000.
the bulk of that is City of Longview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are their rates to us going up? I mean, our
I-
rates to them, excuse me.
Yeah.
Phrase it differently.
Well, we've also had an increase in population.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like the Longview utilities are going up 15,000 from 165 to 180. Solid waste is just going up 50, and gas and utilities are going up 10.
I was kind of being sarcastic about making sure
Yeah.
the rate they pay goes
Yeah,
up
yeah.
commensurate with.
Could do some sort of a,
I think
Credit.
the 23 budget probably was lower than it probably should have been a little bit as part of that issue.
and then the last item on there is a capital request we put in for an inmate ID system that would allow us to put bracelets, or there's some other options on inmates to identify them. It also will allow us to track our inmate rounds differently and to track their activities. Most facilities have these at this point, and we're a little behind. If that,
This is
Sorry.
much like the ankle bracelet kind of concept.
kind of, well, it's more like a
Well, right,
like a
but it's the
hospital
same
bracelet
idea.
with photo ID on it, and we'd be able to scan to confirm identity.
Does, if they walk out of the facility somehow, does it let you know where they've gone, or it's easy to take off?
I don't believe it does that.
Okay.
So I suppose judges won't allow chips to be installed.
I don't, not that I know of.
Darn.
And that is a really kind of a placeholder. We would have to go out to bid on this, but this is a price for a service we've identified that we would be interested in. So any questions on the jail budget thus far?
So do all the departments know that this is the trend this year? Departments' requests are going down.
Well, I did cut 2 officer positions during COVID, and I
Oh,
will
that's
ask for
true.
them back, but I'm going to wait till we get more fully staffed, because at this point, it doesn't make sense. So if nothing else, on to offender services. There's no notable changes. That budget also has a decrease. And probation services, same, a very slight increase in that budget. The concessions budget, I don't know if you all are familiar. Would you like an explanation of what that is?
Part of that is communicating with family and friends, isn't it?
So the concessions budget is driven by the funds we receive from concessions, so commissary. So we take a profit on commissary, and we take a profit on a phone communication, the tablets, and all of that. And there were years ago when you were required per OCW to it was like an enterprise fund and you had to spend that on inmate supplies or inmate related expenses that benefit inmates. I should say that. So we try to keep those pretty close to in line. They're not exact, so that we increase that because we've seen an increase in revenue as our population has gone up. So it's used to buy things like religious materials for inmates. They can request certain religious materials if they're of different religions. Supplies for inmate workers. We buy clothes for people exiting the jail if they don't have proper clothes. Sometimes people come in and almost nothing and need something to wear on their way out. That sort of thing.
Because they put on weight.
Hmm?
Because they put on weight, you feed them well.
Or because they came in their underpants.
And you said that the margin that we make has to be spent on similar goods, or can it go to pay for medically assisted treatment?
I guess it could probably be used for medically assisted treatment. It is. We're not required to spend it on inmate programs, but
Okay.
we've kind of continued that and most jails do the same.
I know this is a little picky-unish. I'd rather we just didn't use the word profit. I'm not sure what I would use, but it gives the wrong signal. You're,
Yeah.
When I was on the board for the hospital, a nonprofit, they used margin. That was the word for the.
I like
extra-
that much better.
Extra income that came in. Didn't stop them from giving themselves six-figure salaries, but still.
Yeah, words matter.
But then I guess we're giving them too, so.
Hmm?
We're giving them too, so I guess we can call it a margin.
All right.
Any comments? Okay, did you have something?
I'm. This is for 2023, right?
2024.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the budget
Oh.
requests are for
Yeah.
24 and 25.
I'm sorry, yeah, I am wondering what the fee we charge is a cost recovery fee if we can. So if City of Longview puts an inmate in, we're just trying to amortize the cost over. And I actually don't know how we do that because it's very, you don't know until after the fact. Do we have some reconciliation after the fact?
Well, that contract with the cities is expired at this time, and that's due to a few different things, changing in personnel at the county as well as changing in personnel at the cities. So I've been working with Kathy on how that rate will be addressed going forward. We're changing the way we get to the rate. So the rate is in our current contract, but we are going to change the rate concept and how we get there.
Here's sort of what I'm driving at is I don't want us to be used as an excuse for not putting somebody in jail that we are spending, that it cost them too much. And I know we have a sunk cost there. As long as you're maybe, I don't know what the number is, above 100 inmates or something like that, there's nothing much you can do. It's going to cost you. And so the adding more staff, more inmates is not $120 a day or however much it is. And do you
Yeah,
understand?
I understand what you're saying because I've listened to Longview have this conversation that if the cost of incarcerating, you almost think they're trying to weigh how much police action do we want to do versus
Yeah,
cost over here. And so I understand where you're going. You don't want them to limit police activity because it's going to cost them too much over here. And if I'm reading right, I'm kind of along your line. I'm not so much worried about if we make a profit on it. I want to cover what it costs us. But I think that's kind of where you're headed
Well,
a little bit.
if I understand the trends, the charges don't come anywhere as close to covering the true cost because we pick up that medical cost. I mean, a portion of it, but I mean, the county taxpayer is subsidizing every prisoner that goes in there.
Yeah, except it depends on how you look at it. So we've got tomorrow, if we add one more inmate to you, what's the additional cost? It's,
So historically, that rate was really driven by the average daily population.
right.
So like in 2020, I don't know what it would have been using that, but it would have been, something like 250 a day because the population dropped so dramatically. So the new rate concept is to do a fixed rate based on the cost, the fixed cost, and then an inmate specific rate is a second portion of that, which will balance it out and keep it from doing these spike highs and lows that cities can't budget for.
Oh, could you explain that again?
Sure. So it'll be a two-part rate rather than one. So before it was basically jail budget, offender
And
services.
that's new
budget.
approach?
The old approach was the whole budget divided by the ADP. So the new concept will be the fixed rate divided by our basically our max, like we're using 300 is the max. So the fixed rate's divided by 300, and then the inmate specific rate, which is food, pharmacy, things that are actually can increase with inmate population, and dividing that by the ADP. So then you have the fixed plus the actual inmate related costs.
But if for some reason we don't have an inmate population of 300, it drops down to 150 for whatever it is, then the county is picking up the tab. And that's a concern you've expressed before. The other side is the one I mentioned and you explained is if we end up with 350, then we're getting considerably more income per new inmate than it's actually costing us. And somehow I'd like to figure out how to let that be usable by the city of Longview, say.
Right. Well, I think you also need to keep in mind that the county, so if Longview books a person on a felony, they pay a booking fee and then they pay nothing after that. So the county picks up all the cost of felony bookings.
Yeah. But I think what's on the table now is a lot of misdemeanors.
Yeah.
I
Longview
mean,
sees-
unfortunately, you have to steal above what? $790 or some number before it's a felony?
Yeah, I'm not sure what that number
Yeah.
is, but yes, you're correct. I know Longview's seen their board bills escalate pretty dramatically because they've been booking a lot of misdemeanors. But our rates are and will be on the lower end of things in the state. We're not, King County Jail, you're 220 a day or something wild, but we're closer to the 100 mark or in that range.
I don't have any answers,
Yeah.
just questions.
No, it's a good
Well,
concern.
I actually like the idea that we address the fixed costs, like you said, it really don't change the more you use the system, but then you do reflect choices that different cities make if they decide to be more aggressive in filing misdemeanor charges rather than felonies. So and that's kind of the user fee on top of just the base rate. So I think,
Right.
I think that's a good compromise.
Yeah.
And as we get closer to a resolution with them on the contract, we'll have a workshop where, we can go into detail on how we're getting to those rates.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you.
Well, that was easy.
Maybe next year. I'll make it more.
Expo, tourism. Assume we just go to tab 9 now?
Tab 9.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Kim Bocut with Cowlitz County Event Center. Which project shall we go first?
So your first narrative is Expo Center.
41101.
Yeah, 41101.
So for our Expo Center budget 41101, we don't have any major changes or no notable changes. However, the Event Center Master Plan is currently being revised and will be presented in November of 2023. So the plan to move forward with our RV park project will hopefully occur early in 2024. And then another thing to note is that the planned hotel development moves forward in our grounds, a mid-cycle budget update will be necessary to accommodate the new income and expenditures associated with accommodating this change. The construction costs, there's some buildings that need to be moved or raised and some reconfiguring. So that will be coming down the pike, but I don't have a timeline yet. So I did not include it in my anticipated budget.
And
Could you do me a favor and slow down a little bit?
Yes, sorry.
Speaking wise.
Yes.
Thank you.
so Kim, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't our understanding with the hotel include the idea that those kinds of changes, taking down buildings and restructuring the entrance, would all be paid for by the fee we get from the hotelier?
Correct. So the PDA, the Public Development Authority with the City of Longview, actually currently owns the property that is being sold to the potential hotelier. So the proceeds from that sale will go to them. There's 2 buildings that are within that property that will need to be raised, and they will cover, the PDA will cover the cost of that. At the last PFD meeting, Public Facilities District meeting, there was discussion. There are 2 buildings that will need to be raised that are not within that property that they own, and that is our dog building and our natural resource building. So there's a right of way that will come in off of 5th in Kelso.
Right.
And so there was a question of those and how that would be, if we incur those costs, then the reimbursement and then also relocating the space that was in those. So that's what I was talking about with my income and expenditure needs. And just a quick update on that is that the hotelier that is interested in the property now has till March of 2024 to have a substantial plan. And I don't know what what the definition of substantial is, but they've extended that deadline for them. So just moving into our operational metrics and trends. Our event days are getting back to pre-COVID numbers, which is great. Our fair this year was very successful. In 2021, the fair was successful, but we had a lot of expenses that were reimbursed to us through ARPA funding and things like that. In 2022, we still had some of those costs incurred, such as restrooms and things like that were very expensive that we were not reimbursed for. But 2023, we were able to open our facility back up, use our internal restrooms, and that I use that as an example because that was a huge cost increase over the last couple of years that we didn't incur as largely this year. So things are looking good with the event center.
You mentioned in one of the meetings on the fair that the vendors were extremely pleased too. It sounded like they all had a good year.
The weather was very favorable this year, which makes a huge difference in fair attendance. The one metric that we use for fair attendance, because we don't charge admission to our fair, is our parking. The parking fee of $5 hasn't changed in probably 20 years. So when we see that revenue, we know that, that trend kind of helps us track. And our parking revenue was a historical high. So, and our vendors were very happy. Our vendor revenues were up. So, yep.
And the prior year, we did some electrical improvements. I'm assuming we had no issues this time around with all that.
Correct.
Yeah.
We did electrical improvements in our barns. So we didn't, so all of our exhibitors were happy. They were able to use their instruments to be able to prepare their animals without our electrical spider boxes and blowing breakers. And we had a lot of different electrical issues over the years. This last year we had 0. It was very nice. And I'm sure maintenance appreciated that as well.
So, Kim, are you finding that you have plenty of extra time?
No.
So the reason I ask that is that you have mentioned the plans, and thank you for that, for the RV park.
Mhm.
And I want to be in a position to help you be successful. That's going to require somebody to oversee that kind of a project, because you can't add that onto your own, to your plate.
Absolutely.
So what are you thinking about in terms of a project manager for?
I haven't thought too far ahead, other than I've reached out to Public Works a couple of times. We do have some internal staff that have a little bit of RV park knowledge. There's also AKS Engineering that did our land survey, actually does RV park planning. And so I believe once we've chosen a contractor for that, then I can easily work with the general contractor on that.
Because it kind of seems to me then if we've got additional buildings that we have to manage, either building or tearing down or a combination of both, we're going to need a project manager to make sure there's money not wasted.
Absolutely.
And so your budget doesn't include provision for that right now.
No,
So.
But you also don't include income,
correct.
What?
but there is no income included either. So a
Well-
constraint will be as it gets, yeah.
Just as far as I'm concerned, we just keep in mind that that's got to be an expense that we need to deal with. That's just
Absolutely.
good. I think if we've learned anything about projects, you got to have somebody
Yeah.
riding herd on it. And
We're going to have a lot of projects at the event center with when the master plan comes back, there's a lot of great ideas that the consultant that they've hired are coming up with. And so there's going potentially simultaneous projects. So there'll be a lot of oversight between Norm with the PFD board and myself.
so are they in a position to finance that project manager for us?
That's a great question. I think with the projects that they're doing, I believe that they would be funding that as
Somebody
far as our
overseeing the
RV park
hotel
goes.
then, right?
Right.
Okay, yeah. I mean, theoretically, that should be the PDA that does that for the hotel, but I mean, I want to make sure that we have somebody that focuses on all those kind of capital improvements, because between unavoidable delays and shoddy workmanship, if it doesn't get measured and watched, we can lose a lot.
Right. So when the master plan is complete, there will be some financial aspects put together with that. And I believe some project management suggestions as well to the PFD, not the PDA.
So I have this feeling we're already talking about a budget amendment.
Just over
Unless
the-
there's,
I would anticipate over the next several years, there will be
unless
a lot of
the
change.
capital requests or the personnel hearing, you might want to make an addition or a suggestion, at least a placeholder, so that we can kind of have an understanding of where we might be at.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're correct, and I'm a little hazy here because certainly on the RV park, you're gonna have to manage it before you get income coming in. And really, in the long run, it better pay for itself and even more probably. But I'd feel more comfortable seeing
Placeholder.
how we're gonna handle it, yeah.
I had had previous conversations before Kathy came on board, and Kathy and I have not spoken about this.
I'm
but,
sorry, they're a little slower. again.
Sorry. Previously, before Kathy was with us, I had some conversations about the RV park, but my preference would be that it's probably going to be its own budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not part of the expo center.
Well, just another division of of your,
Correct. It would just
whatever
be-
we call your.
Another
your
fund.
multi-department.
Yeah,
And I would support that
it just becomes a business.
You'd
unit.
support
Yeah.
that?
as being a separate fund,
Yeah.
the
okay.
RV park.
Because it should be an enterprise fund ultimately,
Correct.
because it,
Yeah,
My guess is it'll pay for itself, but proof is always in the pudding, right? Yeah.
And we currently host RV campers as, just on our unfinished lots now that are associated with events. So I anticipate that would of course increase. So
Yeah.
So and this, how much do you pull in from the RV park as it is?
I don't have that number in front of me. That's broken down just by camping. We charge $15 a night plus taxes, so it's not a huge amount because it's
Because
considered
just
dry
is it
camping.
what, about 10 days that they stay or less?
Not even.
Not
It's,
even
it's usually a Friday, Saturday night, just when they're there. Like this weekend, we have a cat show, so we'll have
Here's your
campers
number.
overnight.
Here's your number. You have a line that says, RV fair,
It's for the
RV, just
fair.
for the fair.
Yeah. We,
Expo, RV spaces.
go.
So
So in,
6,000.
6,000 in 2022. And to date, through June, I guess so, about 6,700. So at $15 a night, that's,
It's
Not
a lot of nights, but
Yeah.
it's still,
Yeah,
it
that's
is.
quite a bit of nice for
It's
just
cheap.
basically dry camping.
Yeah. And that's very inexpensive compared to what the fair market value would be for
Yeah.
a nice improved RV.
Yeah, you
place.
get
So-
hookups and all that. Yeah.
Correct.
So I'm making the assumption that you have also double checked with the city for zoning. There's temporary camping is one thing, but a full-time,
Correct. And we will have to change the zoning of that lot. If the lot that we had surveyed, which is our Peardell lot, it is zoned to only use during events.
okay, okay.
So that will have to be changed.
So we'll have to go before the Long Beach City Council. and
Yep.
You will have to go through to the city council and
Correct.
be persuasive. Okay,
so
that'll,
following some more questions. That was a great opening question. Anyhow, refresh my memory, how many, when it's all built out, how many RV spots and what do you, part of the rationale is you want to provide a place for the different events to be able to use the RV park. Does that mean we won't have anybody there for any length of time?
The initial thought with the RV park was to provide space for current events and being able to accommodate people that stay overnight that are attached with events, because that's, like I said, that's what we're zoned for. But we also could open up, and I believe the long-term plan should be to open it up to transient, which meaning overnight guests that are not associated with events. Preference being given to blocking out spots for the cat shows, the dog shows, the horse shows. We would have to block out spots to give preference to them, but additional spots being available to,
during the ever increasing smelt runs, that would probably be a pretty popular
Yeah.
trailer park for
Mhm.
fishers.
Or people down watching a baseball tournament or
Yeah.
something of that nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One more option, but
We have a lot of people that overnight with horses because we have facilities for horses. So we get a lot of requests, people traveling up and down the I-5 corridor to be able to pull in with their horse trailer and put their horse in a stall for the night and camp also.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different requests that we field currently and that will continue to with this improved park.
Just out of curiosity, if you were everything were already built now, what would the $15 translate into?
The last time I did research on our local rates, our rate would be around 50, would be an average $50 per night
the hookups.
with
full
hookups.
hookups, yeah.
Mhm. Which I think is still
Sounds
probably
reasonable.
low in the 2023 scheme. That was, I believe, 2021 that I was doing a little bit of research on that.
Probably a lot cheaper than the hotel will be.
Yes.
Oh, and then timetable of the hotel.
The timetable of the hotel, so there has been some earnest money put down. They have until March of 2024 to have a viable plan to the PDA. And I don't know what viable plan means. As I mentioned, I don't know if that means shovel in the ground, if that means an architect's rendering, I'm not sure.
Is that another rezone requirement too?
That is a great
I
question.
can't remember the list, the permitted uses, so I knew it was temporary trailers, but I didn't know about hotel.
That's a great question. I don't know that.
So I feel like it would take me a lot of time to try and understand enough here. So let me ask it in a very simple way. If the hotelier drops out and nothing happens, how does this impact the budget?
Currently, it does not impact our budget
Thank you.
because until the hotel is built, we're status quo. We use that property, we have it rented different times for different events, so.
Yeah, part of my question is there are the buildings in question that you might have included some costs in there that what you did. Okay.
Rental would be included in one of those buildings, but it's very minor.
Okay, next. Um, 4102.
Okay.
Did you do the gift shop?
Nope.
Okay.
I've got 3 more budgets to go through. So 41102 is the event center. No notable changes. Again, we're getting back to pre-COVID trends. And that our business is growing. Our event day numbers aren't quite there yet, but our revenues are coming back. We're finding that the meeting industry in some ways has changed, in some ways it hasn't. I think people are getting more comfortable. So we're seeing a lot more weekday meetings. Our current marketing strategy is going after corporate business, midweek, multi-day events that are using hotel rooms. As an example, we had a 5-day training last week. It was for about 30 people, but they used local hotels. It was for some caregiver training, but those are the types of things that we're really trying to capture. Our weekend business is back to booming. It has been. All of our animal shows are coming back. Last weekend, we hosted an event for the Humane Society, which was a new event for them. It was an Oktoberfest themed event. And our fall and winter are looking very busy. So things are looking very good with the event center.
Yeah, I can, echo that when I see the budget stuff at the monthly meetings, the revenues just look really good.
And so the
And-
flip side of that is trying to keep expenses down. Our utilities are out of our control, but trying to be mindful in expenditures, but our revenues are definitely coming in well.
Are there, have you looked at all into any possibilities of utilizing solar as an energy source? You've got a lot of buildings, and I know they're not all flat roofed, but there aren't trees to block them. I would imagine PUD might jump at the chance of making yet one more investment, Cowles County government, to put together some solar panels. And I think there may be grants to make it available.
I have not looked into that, but I just
Yeah.
made myself a note to contact the PUD.
Just guessing is.
Not included in my budget because the PFD will be paying for it, but there will be some remodeling happening at the event center. The first project that they awarded at their meeting last week was the restrooms will be renovated. They are awarding that contract to JH Kelly, and it's a 6 to 7 week project. So trying to find 6 to 7 weeks that we can displace restrooms is going to be a little challenging, but
Brian had to be happy, right?
Brian will be happy. Now he's focusing on
And that-
something else.
And that kitchen must be showing some age too. I mean, we're about 20 years into it now, aren't we? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah,
Is that-
the equipment that we bought for the kitchen was really nice equipment, thankfully.
Yeah.
So that has really I should knock on wood while I say this, but it has really held out for us. We haven't needed any major, we've had a lot of, like, right now our dishwasher needs some decent repairs, but our ovens, which is our main stay, has been, they've been pretty solid. We've added some equipment over the years to help the caterer, but
So a few weeks ago, there was a big event at the Hotel Monticello
Mhm.
celebrating the centennial. So the whole ballroom was packed and music and dancing and everything. The food was prepared at your kitchen.
it was.
Yeah, and trucked over because it exceeded the
Huh.
capacity of the hotel to handle it. So that was nice. So I saw the familiar faces of the crew from the fairgrounds, so.
Yeah.
It was
So our
nice.
on-site caterer does provide food for, that, he doesn't provide it for other venues. Typically, that was
Yeah.
one thing that he and I met about and he had permission to do because of the nature of the event. It
Right.
didn't make sense to have it at our venue. But we do make a percentage when he uses our kitchen for outside events. So that is, extra revenue that we receive when he'll cater to, as an example, he'll do a shift lunch down at one of the mills for, 300 or 400 people. So we'll get a percentage of those,
Yeah.
that sale. So,
Yeah. Used to cater all our board meetings.
Are there any questions on the event center before we move on to my next budget?
The, the increase between 24 and 25 is determined by what?
Are you asking revenue wise or expenditure wise?
On the budget.
On the,
It would be the
Expense.
revenue essentially.
yeah, so he's looking at the 23 budget expenses versus 24 and 25.
Oh, so it's really the trends of revenues versus expenses. So the trend, things are more expensive. Therefore, we're paying more. So we had to balance that to adjust for our increased income and expenses.
So that's a conservative increase.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have any, I assume in 26, we hope that the hotel being there would really boost that.
We'll double it. Oh.
Yeah.
Maybe not, but yes. Yeah, we should be trending up every year.
Gift shop.
The next fund, 41105, our Silver Lake Gift Shop. Again, no notable changes other than increases in operational expenses as well as which includes the products that we buy. We're having to buy more because we're selling more, which is a great problem to have. Then also our revenues reflect that. The gift shop continues to be profitable. We do have an agreement with Expo. We have not made the $50,000 transfer, but there is an agreement that we can transfer up to $50,000 to Expo operations if necessary from the gift shop. We did do that in 2019 and 2020. We have not needed that transfer since 2020. And year to date, our revenues are exceeding our expenses by about 150,000. That number will not be quite there by the end of the year. Our sales slow, but we still have expenses in personnel. We do hire temp staff that staffs that full time.
The reason you have a 0.45 FTEs because you're averaging over the entire year when
The FTEs, there's a portion of my salary and there's a portion of one of our event coordinators at the event center that is my backup that will go up and help with the financial, the banking side of things. And then Shelby in our office, our administrative assistant pays the bills for that. So that's what the FTEs. So the rest is under temporary excuse me.
That's wrong. I'm sorry. This is the gift shop. Oh, and The labor is just pieces of y'all.
That's us. Yep. Yep. Temporary services. Excuse me, our temporary help is under temp services, under supplies. So that's our, we use employers overload mainly for our temporary or our temporary employees, seasonal employees. I don't want to call them temporary.
So you're cutting half an FTE. I hadn't noticed that before. From 8.5 to 8.
On the gift shop, it shows 0.45 FTEs.
I'm just looking at the grand total.
Oh. It was in the expo center, it looks like, and I can double check those numbers. Because the expo center, the conference center was 4.10 and then went down to 3.6. That's where the change was at.
That's probably that temporary help type
Yeah.
stuff. Huh?
I'll look and double check that.
On your,
That was
yeah,
the
yeah,
23 budget.
yeah, on your gift shops, it's somewhat ironic. The issues with Johnson Ridge didn't hurt. It actually kind of boosted. Weren't you seeing tour buses starting to stop at
It did.
gift
So-
center?
Yeah, so the tour buses stop with us in the spring and in the fall, and some of them stop year round, but there's different companies that will just drive straight up to Johnston Ridge and then they leave. They have one stop. That's what they'll maybe stop for lunch. This year, because Johnston Ridge was closed, they started coming to us, and then Johnston Ridge, the staff at Johnston Ridge opened up the Coldwater Center, and so they moved their gift shop there. They were able, so that is still open. However, we have not seen a slowdown with the buses. In fact, we just received the revised schedule from one of the tour lines, and they're scheduled to be with us, I believe, 2 extra days starting this month or starting in October. So we are seeing an increase in tours overall with the terminal down in Kalama. And they're also coming in from Astoria. We've always seen tour business, but I feel like last year and this year, we've definitely seen an uptick. And with the cruise terminal in Kalama, that'll continue.
Does the cruise ship pay a portion of lodging tax when they stay over in Kalama?
I don't believe they stay. Well, oh, that's a good question. I guess that when they dock overnight, if there's I would assume there would be some kind of a moorage or
How would we know? We might not know.
that's a really good question though. It would make sense because they're using utilities and
Mhm.
which would be maybe to the city of Kalama or the port of Kalama, I guess.
Probably they're renting from the Port of Kalama, but it's a city tax because it's within the city limit. Well,
It'd be a port tax.
I don't know if it's in the city limits or not. I think they are though.
Great question.
You didn't hear that from me though.
It's a great, it's just that from a tourism standpoint, I'd
Get
like
get
to.
Bob Ferguson on it right away.
I know it. I get a call from Adam.
So things are going well at the gift shop. Our contract is the 5-year contract. It's up through 2024 and unless the choice of the board is to not extend that contract, I would like to reapply to be up there for another 5 years after starting in 2025.
It's been a good relationship for us.
It has been a great relationship, especially from a tourism standpoint as well.
Tune of $150,000.
Yeah, yeah, financially, it's working out well, but also.
They may raise their rate though for us.
Yeah, yeah. And we have a great relationship with the state parks, so that really is another benefit.
Where's the your last one?
All right. And last but not least is tourism, 15801. With this budget, when we prepared our budget, I didn't make any notable changes, but I had a lot of questions. And so Kathy and I have met in person and on the phone, kind of talking about some different ideas, really trying to get to the bottom of the transient tax and then the 2% hotel motel tax that we receive in Cowlitz County, and trying to understand a little bit of the history and what is getting us to where we are now. And so some of this, so the 2% currently, there's 3 buckets of money. One is a stadium tax, so the transient tax is being deposited into the stadium tax. The 2% lodging tax is being split. 1% goes into 15801, which I manage that budget. That's our direct marketing. That's what we are spending on websites and geofencing and a lot of the different print advertising that we're doing. So that, and that funds employees. The other 1% is going into the cumulative reserve fund, and which rightfully concerns Kathy, because that cumulative reserve is really, is not maybe being used correctly. So that 1% has been put into that. Historically, I believe that 1% that was going into the cumulative reserve was to repay the county for Hofstad Bluffs construction. Since Hofstad Bluffs closed at the end of 2016, then the Big Idea Board came into play. And that was a funding mechanism to disperse some of those funds into the city so that they could use them for tourism related activities or festivals or improvements to their own tourist facilities to the different cities. That board has gone away also. And so the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee that oversees the granting of this money has developed a small grant that's they award up to $50,000 to entities. And then 2 years ago, they developed a large grant. So they have 2, and the large grant is every other year that they award. The small grant, the 50,000, is yearly, and we've been doing that for quite a while. Moving forward, I'll let you talk a little bit about your thoughts of moving forward.
My budgets that I oversee, one of them is the cumulative reserve fund. And so we didn't really get to discuss it yet. And I was planning on discussing it tomorrow when I have another session. But the policy that goes with that does not match what we're actually doing. And the revenue stream coming into that account is 100% right now, other than investment income, is 100% the lodging tax. And so it makes sense that if we wanted to, we could change and just move that lodging tax straight into the tourism account. And that's the suggestion that I was going to have. So, but it also can be used for capital improvements. So part of it could be reserved and set aside for capital improvements of our own county-owned facilities, tourism-related facilities. So being the event center.
So I can't remember which bucket of money was the result of negotiations with the state for us, for Cowlitz County, to do the statewide promotion for tourism at Mount St. Helens. And it's either 1% or 2%. I can't remember. In every other county, that money goes to the cities.
Correct.
So it would, I like the idea of making sure we have the policies to return money to the cities for their festivals and celebrations. And it directly relates to my question about Kalama, because between McMenamins and the dock, they're generating more than ever before towards that fund. And until just recently, they've not been getting very much. So there's a little, well, we need to be sharing it with, because it's all about tourism and promote all the different kind of tourism festivals.
Correct.
As long as we continue to make sure that our St. Helens promotion continues to be effective or improves. It's always tough to tell if we're getting more tourists up at Mount St. Helens or less, because it depends on weather and it depends on natural disasters like a landslide. So.
Correct. So as I mentioned, the I did not make any changes to the 15801 as it stands right now. We would, of course, need to account for the additional 1% being put into that, if that's the direction that you want to go with the, taking that out of the cumulative reserve. Another option, again, as Kathy mentioned, we haven't really completely talked this all the way through, but there's also the stadium fund that other 1% could go in as a holding place. The Lodging Tax Advisory Committee meets approximately 4 times a year, and they, with their granting capabilities, I guess, so they have the 2 different grant cycles, they score the grants, and they and then we disperse them, but they make the recommendation. Currently, the 50,000, the small grant is already in my budget. The larger grant, the 100,000, has been coming out of the, I believe, cumulative reserve, which I don't oversee. So that's a communication that I have with OAS to make sure that those transfers are being made, and it makes it messy. So,
So I think the request is for us to decide to go ahead and move that money over to your fund.
And it's, as we said, it's sales tax money, and its purpose is for promoting tourism and marketing and operations costs. Can be operations cost, marketing, as well as some capital.
So.
How much are, what's in there now? It's
Okay,
probably in here somewhere, but
it is.
Yeah.
so in 2022, our collection was 620,000 over through the 3 buckets. That's the transient plus the 2%.
so that's what's sitting in the cumulative fund? No.
No, just it's in my, so the cumulative fund reserve has, it has a fund balance. Hold on, let me find it. Hey, man, I have too many pages. Okay. So currently the revenues have been budgeted conservatively, and so we have a fund balance right now. I'm estimating at $500,000 in a fund balance. It's actually bringing in, as far as revenue, looking to see if I can see what's bringing in as far as revenues. Yeah, I can't find it. So those are my expenses.
And what we distribute out to the cities now, is it based on what they bring in?
No. So
It's just like we just divide it by population or something?
So we have a couple, so in 2022 and also in 2023, well, historically, we give some funding to the chambers and visitor centers. The Kelso Longview Chamber of Commerce receives 20,000, the Castle Rock Visitor Center receives 15,000, and the Woodland Visitor Center receives 15,000. And then we also have our small grant program that goes out to the various events, and that's not directly to the cities. It's just to, as an example, Squatch Fest put on by the Kelso Longview Chamber of Commerce. The Luluska Foundation applies every year for some of their programming needs. The Unique 10 Car Club, Hulda Klager Lilac Gardens, different events that are tourism related apply for those funds. The Lodging Tax Advisory Committee this spring actually voted to award each city, I believe it was 30,000 each to each city, to each of the 5 cities, to give them money to the city for tourism related activities. So again, that wasn't in my budget. So that's when Kathy and I met. It was like, I don't oversee the cumulative reserve. So how do we manage that? So trying to streamline how those things can happen.
And-
Because
Okay.
Yeah, that part of the sales tax that's going into the cumulative reserve, it's running about 250,000 a year. We've only been budgeting 150,000.
Okay,
So that's how it's building
Yeah.
up a fund balance.
So I think you have about 750,000 ending fund in 2025, right?
And
Sure.
we have been transferring out some. We've been transferring out 95,000 annually, but
Well, I think, based on our earlier conversation about changes at the fair, this may be a fund that would fit moving some of those buildings around. You mentioned that some had to be raised and moved out of the way. So that
yeah, that's
should
what,
probably plan
So-
on that, but I don't mind. I would agree to go ahead and move that 100,000 for the big project like they asked. So that you don't have to go back and forth. I'm okay.
yeah. I agree with Commissioner Weber on, I think some of that should be retained because if we take those buildings away, we're gonna have to do something and then we'd have the resources to do that.
and that
And
does
if-
fall within the statute that we. can
Yeah,
spend
and
that
then
money.
if we're given, and I'm not totally opposed to giving sales tax that the cities and stuff have. I guess I'd rather it be hooked to something like Klama's bringing in more sales tax revenue, so then they're gonna get a bigger. I'm just using this, I don't know if they are or not, but something, if they're doing things that promote more to their deal, then they get a kind of a carrot, like if you're doing more, you're gonna get more.
So that's all part of.
And I don't know how you do that.
They have to document what they've used it on, make sure it goes for tourism. So.
Yes, we do have to
Yeah.
report every
Yeah.
year what the dollars were spent on, our own dollars. And then if we have granted that, then that's part of our grant contract that they have to fill out a report letting us know how the monies were spent. The city that this really helps in distributing evenly is Castle Rock, because Castle Rock has the least amount of lodging. So I know when we had gone before the state regarding our 2%, Castle Rock was really for the county keeping that 2% to ourselves, because what we do benefits Castle Rock. And if this money went back to the cities, of course, they would get the least amount coming back to them. So they feel that the countywide tourism promotion is beneficial to them. So
What are the other? I guess maybe we should ask all the cities, maybe they don't want to take it on. Interesting, okay.
So the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, when they met, I believe it was springtime that they met, and they had agreed to take the 30,000 per city and grant that to those cities to use for tourism related things. And just a flat, even split between the 5 cities. So
I bet Kelso would probably disagree since they have the most hotel rooms.
Yeah.
We get
and
into
they
that.
do collect their own lodging taxes too. The cities do
do.
collect a city lodging tax, and then the county is on top of that. So they do get their own share.
So basically what they're suggesting here is we give the cities a bonus because we built up this fund and we're really not using it right. Is
Correct.
that what I'm hearing?
We'd like to, they would like to get the money back to the cities. We'd like it to be used for, and it's nothing that it's not a permanent, it's something that they want to review annually. Based on what we have with the tourism department, if there's needs within the county, as we mentioned, the event center buildings or different things like that would come up. But as far as granting, that's where the LTAC comes in and makes those decisions.
And if we did that, it still keeps funds in there if we need to replace
Yeah.
those buildings at the
And
expo center.
the other one that you have that's available for capital is your stadium fund. And the stadium fund has a fund balance as well, about 284,000 right now. And it too is budgeted very conservatively, and it's not transferring out all that it's earning. So, and it's transferring right now, I think about 60,000 to tourism.
Yeah,
But it's earning more than that. So it's an area that we could utilize for capital.
Well, I have a lot of trust in you, and when you're telling me that we're really not doing what we're supposed to with that, then
Yeah.
I kind of listen. Now, the solution you have, it doesn't make me throw up. I don't know what everybody else feels, but and as long as you look at it annually, it's not, well, we expect to get this every year type thing. Other thoughts? I think you're kind of getting a head nod that we're okay with the transfer and stuff, but I think we want to be sure that we review that every year and it just doesn't get to be an expectation.
I think so long as it fits within the grant application, that they actually have to do a grant application. I think
Have
that's
to.
the right way to go.
Yeah. Okay.
Did you have any questions for me with the tourism budget?
Any other questions? Public comments, anything? We're okay? Okay.
And that leaves us about 5 minutes for the sheriff's. budget.
Well, Brad's fast. Yeah,
Thank you, commissioners.
thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Yes. You're so organized, it's going to be smooth sailing. Yeah. So one of the things I make one comment on the sheriffs, on the other departments. Remember we said as far as direct labor goes, we haven't added any personnel and we hadn't added any COLAs either.
Mhm.
But for the sheriff's office,
Sorry, Joe.
Katrina went through because they have a contract
Right.
and she went through and amended all of their direct labor numbers to include,
To match the
to match
contracts.
the contract.
Yeah, makes sense.
Morning, commissioners.
We'll make a few brief comments and defer to Katrina Harris, our budget finance manager, who's worked closely with Kathy in crafting this proposal that's before you today. Just want to say, by and large, our proposal's status quo with one exception. And I think in your packet, you have a request for an additional detective for the sheriff's office. And I know that's subject to a hearing here. I think in a couple of weeks, you'll be looking at additional FTEs, but just in brief, that's a position for our detectives to do forensic digital analysis of cell phones and computers, which is a ever-growing aspect of many criminal cases that we do. And coupled with additional duties of background investigations, which we seem to have a steady flow of those that we do for prospective hires, and those can take up to 40 hours per investigation. So I can address that, I guess, at the appropriate time. But that's really the only major change that's before you from the prior 2 years. We'll just mention, well, 2 years ago, he authorized 4 additional deputies for us, and we appreciate that. We've hired those folks, but coupled with some retirements and that, getting fully hired and trained up is kind of an elusive goal that we're constantly working towards. And I think in my 4.5 years as sheriff, we've been fully hired up twice, once for 2 weeks and once for 2 days. So currently we have an opening for deputy based on a recent retirement and one for a records clerk as well. But we're moving forward. We're doing well on staffing. We have recently hired 2 lateral deputies, one from the Salem, Oregon Police Department and one from the Wahkiakum County Sheriff's Office. And they're both on track here to be out on their own here in the next couple months.
So the 3 of us should not travel through Wahkiakum County anytime soon.
Probably not. Yeah, no. I think they're okay with it, but we also have a deputy who's graduating from the academy next Tuesday. So she'll be on about a 3-week training or 3-month training program after that. So we're getting there and we're seeing that in our scheduling and looking at look at the dispatch board of deputies out there based on our staffing. It's really good to see at times we have 7 and 8 deputies out working at a time. So that's not always the case. They have vacation, sick leave and training, but we do notice the increase in staffing and also getting to the point where we are getting hired up and getting people trained. So it just better allows us to serve the public. And things are really looking good in comparison to other law enforcement around the country. We're doing well.
So I don't know when the right time is to ask, but I've had some folks ask about the 400,000 addition, the mental health staffers. How do we know that money's being spent well?
Well, when we started this a little over a year ago, I think we made the first hire in August of 2022. It's been a process of hiring folks and transitions. So really been fully probably up and running really since the first of the year. And I know we had a discussion here maybe a month or so ago concerning that and presented some data and information on that. So we know they're active. They're making contacts out there. And beyond that, I think they are being effective. We rely on them they handle a certain number of calls, and other times after a deputy makes initial contact, they'll bring them in to do additional follow-up with the folks there with the whole objective of the whole program. It was a pilot project going in. We didn't really have a hard set of rules. Actually, it's something really new across the nation with law enforcement integrating mental health professionals, but I think they have been effective in dealing with certain folks and keeping them out of jail and out of the mental health, emergency mental health system, getting them plugged into services and keeping them off our radar.
So this morning at the health board meeting, we had quite a bit of discussion from the public about their concerns about drugs in the community and a lot of different suggestions on how to solve that problem. But one of the more consistent ones was more law enforcement. Do you have any particular plans to address that public request?
Well, there's a lot of things going on with that across the board. As you probably followed the Blake decision and kind of the roller coaster we went on with that from going from having a felony drug possession law to essentially no enforcement. Now, as of August 15th, we got the ability to arrest people for gross misdemeanors and are doing so.
Mhm.
So that's one of the tools we have is to actually arrest people. The ultimate goal is to get people off drugs and into services. Our behavioral health unit, they work 7 days a week, and based on scheduling, we have a substance abuse disorder specialist as a member of the team that works with folks like that. And as you know, about every week you're approving new programs. I mean, there's treatment options available out there in the community. It's a matter of getting people plugged into those. The courts I know have addressed, and I think spoke with you about trying to ramp up a district court, drug court, since that's where drug possession cases are now going to be is through district court. That's a new change as well. So I think it's a multifaceted approach as enforcement's one part of it, also the treatment part as well. And interested in, the opioid funds that are available, how those can be used to address some of these concerns. It doesn't affect the sheriff's office or the county per se, but the cities I know are bearing a lot of expense based on jail booking fees daily for these folks. And then they have to prosecute them and hire a public defense lawyer to represent those folks. A lot of the cost has been shifted actually from the state, because previously if you're charged with a felony, the state would take responsibility, prosecute, and then also lodge them or supervise them through the Department of Corrections. So that's really the big change. And this went into effect August 15th. So I don't think we've seen the full impact yet. I know certain Longview, talking with their chief, they're saying their jail budget, I think, is already shot for the year based on that. They've been quite aggressive in arresting folks for possession of drugs.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay. Just one additional comment. As you know, costs are going up. We have certainly the collective bargaining agreements. Big other expenses we have besides personnel are vehicles and IT, and certainly both of those have gone up. Our fuel costs and that sort of thing. So that's what a lot of that increase would reflect, are those types of costs. On the good news side of things, the 911 contribution that the county makes, there's a proposal before the board coming up here for budget that they're going to request less user fees. And if approved, our amount would go down about 63,000 next year. And the plan is to continue to drop that by 10% in 2025 and 2026, based on revenues they have and reserves based on pretty robust sales tax, I think the 1/10 of 1%. And that's built over the several years that they've been collecting that over, I think it's over 4 million now. So that's going to be reflected in less cost to the county and also the other users, the cities and fire districts in that regard.
So we've noticed that according to the census, Woodland has been the fastest growing community. Have you detected that? Because I would assume the larger a city, the more calls and
Yes,
arrests
yeah,
and so on.
actually, and you reflected in their population growth and their police department, they've added officers as well, they've grown. And just listening anecdotally on the radio, adding a Walmart to your city really increases the amount of calls for police service. They're there on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day. So dealing with that, and my understanding is there's a substantial amount of residential construction going on in that area as well. So it'll continue to grow.
First time I'm scanning through this real quick. I don't see it, but I know we're going to be taking on animal control. And I don't know that it's probably not in here yet, but at some point in time, we have to put that in, although we should have less expense on one side. And I don't know if we'll make those even, but we do expect
yes.
to have that come up, right?
Yeah, that's a work in progress, kind of got dropped on us here fairly recently after the budget process was already started. But currently the county allocates $363,000 for animal control in the county. And collectively with the cities, I think it's close to $1 million the Humane Society was receiving, but we're crafting a plan for animal control and then also discussions with the Humane Society on the contract for sheltering and care of the animals as well. So I think my undersheriff's coming to speak with you on Monday about the personnel side
Oh,
of things.
okay.
And there's negotiations or discussions amongst the county, the prosecutor's office and the city is on negotiating a care contract with the Humane Society. They provided us with a draft. And I want to have some further discussion on that to hopefully reach some kind of agreement to bring to you. So we're trying to keep in that general ballpark of where we're at
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. I know that's the goal. I'm just.
Okay, I had no further comments, so I know defer to Katrina if she wants to give a rundown. If you have any questions on any specific budgets that we have presented.
Mhm.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. When I did this the last couple years, Commissioner Weber had asked me to put together how much we have from all different sources. So I have included different sources on here. I believe you received this document from Kathy that has the breakdown. So civil service is actually managed through Kathy's office, but it does only help the sheriff's office. So I wanted to include all the revenue sources that touch the sheriff's office on here. The civil service budget has enough money to pay for a citizen to be their secretary. And then they pay for the publicsafetytesting.com to do the tests for us. And then their only significant thing is about $17,000 is for them to conduct a sergeant's exam for the civil service. Public safety comes in, it pays for lodging for out-of-town people to come through and do that. It's about a 3-day process on there. But it is, I worked with the civil service to create that budget and then presented that budget to Kathy. So I wanted to include that in there. On the sheriff's budget, notable things that are changes is that our deputies have a settled contract where they're getting 5% COLA for 2024 and another 4% COLA for 2025. Our administrative undersheriff, our chief administrative deputy, and our chief criminal deputy's wages are based off of the union contract. So those also have increased this year. One thing to note is that our clerks have not settled their contract. It expires December. And so their wages are not included. They're just status quo in here. They do include if somebody had a step increase at the rate that was already adopted, but at some point when that gets settled, we'll have to make those adjustments in there. Overtime is reflecting 30,000 increase. That is only the 5% and the 4% of COLA, just an increase in that area. Medical is entered in by the budget office and it's showing an estimated $85,000 increase and $150,000 increase for the 2 years on our budget. Motor pool has a cost allocation that is presented, and it looks like it is going to be about a $45,000 increase, which makes sense. We have 4 more deputy vehicles with the 4 new deputies. And then in 24, it looks like they've projected it'd be another 74. It's a pretty significant amount of money that's set aside for our motor pool each year. Found that number for you. It's 953,400 for 24 and 982,000 for 25. That's about, if I remember correctly, about $20,000 per vehicle. $15,000 of that goes to a reserve fund for replacing that vehicle in 5 years, and the other 5 is for any like tires or oil changes or minor repairs to those vehicles in there.
So the motor pool is paid out of the sheriff's office. Is that right?
Correct.
Along
They-
with the salaries that we've talked about.
The motor pool for our vehicles, we have a fund that they charge us and we pay it over to the motor pool and they
Right,
save it.
but it comes out of the sheriff's, not one of the other funds.
Correct, out of the
Okay,
sheriff's
okay.
budget, yes. And then IT has a pretty significant increase with their cost allocation too. I'm sure Kathy will speak more to that, but it's a $77,000 increase this year and $96,000 increase for the following year. So it's about a $423,000 increase from 23's adopted budget right now to for 24, and then it's $895,000 from 23 to 25 for their budget. A lot of that is the wages with the deputies and then all the costs and benefits associated with that. Some of our more notable things in our budget, we're not asking for anything that's really outstanding differences any place in here. But some of our big ticket items are the 911. And currently we have in here 556,000 in there. That's what we're paying this year for the 911 budget. But like the sheriff said, it should be, if adopted, 492,000, and we'll be able to reduce that amount by approximately $63,000. They haven't adopted their budget. They just told us about the change on there. So that wasn't in there at the time we put this in there. And our other, it's not a big change in here, but it's a big ticket for us, is the Phoenix Security. And so our Phoenix Security for 23 is $405,000 a year. That is the worst case scenario if every single person showed up to work every day to do every section. I don't think we've ever hit that number. I don't know right at this second how much that is, but it's been less than that. We have a proposal for 24 and 25 to be 424,603 in 24 and 445,847 in 25. So not a significant increase tremendously for that, but I wanted to point that out.
So you're reading it off of notes
Yeah.
because it's not clearly identified in the
Correct.
VARS list?
All of these numbers are in just professional services where it says 610,000. But that's a notable thing to me that in the next 2 weeks, I'll be bringing an addendum to you for that contract for 24 to increase their wages in that contract, but we've already put those numbers in the budget. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
But before Phoenix Security, we were paying wages to our deputies to stand in there and do that, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
One other thing that's in our professional service, we have other little things, but bigger things is the $77,000 for the Children and Justice Advocacy Center for CASA. That's also included in that 600,000. So other than that, in the sheriff's budget, there's not a lot of really notable changes, a little increase here and there for cell phones and different things. Probably the biggest thing that you'll notice at the very end of the budget is we took out the bond payment for the Bearcat. And Kathy and I have been working on trying to get a fund of its own for the Bearcat. When that was established, they put it in the sheriff's budget, but the contracts for all the cities that are paying in has some ongoing maintenance costs and things. And at the end of the year, the money just goes back to general fund. But I actually collected that money from Woodland and Kalama and Longview and Kelso for that Bearcat. So I don't have access to those funds that are gone anymore. So Kathy's going to present, I believe next Tuesday.
Yeah, it's included in our budget amendment to create a new fund
Right.
for the Bearcat and to have revenues going into that account and expenses coming out of that fund.
And we have 9 more years to pay on the bond. So the money will come in from the entities and we'll pay the bond principal and interest payments, but we'll also have some funds extra to help with the maintenance of the Bearcat. So those are taken out of the budget if you see those blank lines in there. For other budgets, any questions on the sheriff's budget? We got lots of little budgets, so. The next budget is currently called, we have one for the sheriff extradition. We're responsible for extradition for the county, so there isn't really any notable changes there. I don't know what they all do with all of that extradition, but so that one, it doesn't have hardly any increase except for the wages of the deputies.
So Wakaiyakam is not trying to extradite our sheriff in revenge.
Has to be another
misunderstood.
state, I think.
Our next budget is currently called the Drug Task Force. The Drug Task Force was last March, I believe. They no longer are in place. However, we have a lot of cases and a lot of evidence and a lot of restitution money that still has to come in for many years to come. And it's been decided between the Cowlitz Wakaiyakam Narcotics Drug Task Force that the sheriff's office will maintain getting any of the money that comes in for that. So we have asked Kathy if we could present to the commissioners to change the name of this fund to be the Sheriff's Crime Reduction Team, which the sheriff has within our agency dealing with that right now. But we also need the name for Cowlitz Wakaiyakam Narcotics Drug Task Force because the checks come in that name for many years to come. For example, I just got a restitution check for a 2009 case that was $2,000, but I have to have a mechanism to be able to deposit it. And I don't know how long that's going to go on, but we definitely have evidence that eventually will be able for us to sell. And then the revenue has to come back in the same form. So we'll have to have a place to put there. There's not a lot of,
I think the state auditor appreciates keeping those dollars separated.
yes, it
Yeah.
needs to be separate. So every time we seize any money, once it's forfeited, even if it's $10, I owe 10% of that to the state once a year. So I literally have sold a cell phone for 70 cents and owed 7 cents to the state. And there's tons of forms to fill out to send that 7 cents to the state for any time there's a seizure. Most of the time, it's a lot of items at once. But I did get a check for 70 cents at an auction at one time. So there's not much noticeable things there. Some of the costs that we do have is we have some undercover cars that are not in the motor pool. And we do have some repairs and maintenance costs and some internal service fund charges for that budget. Any questions on that one? We got a lot of little budgets, so. Okay, the next fund is our boat fund. And this is a fund that we get revenue from a grant that has gone downhill every year since I've been at the sheriff's office, but it also, we get revenue from vessel fees in there. We have to do so many patrols and so many inspections during the summer months to get this money. The requirements have exceeded the amount of money we have. So some of the things that we have to do to be able to maintain this grant funding and maintain the vessel money, the sheriff now has to eat that cost in the sheriff's budget. Some of the overtime, some of the other costs now have to go in the sheriff's budget because they're considering us a large entity and the amount of hours that we have to do and the amount of items we have to do, there's not enough grant money to do it. And if we didn't meet that requirement, then they would take away all vessel money and all grant money. So we work really closely with our services department to make sure we have enough man hours in to still get that grant funding in.
So these are actions that you must do, and we've been offsetting it with some grant money. And now
Yes.
they're lowering it, they're passing
It used to be
kind of
that we
those
could-
costs on. you can't stop doing those actions
We
if
can,
it's not paying for itself?
we can stop, but we would lose our vessel money and we would lose the grant money, so we wouldn't have.
But if
any-
it's costing you more than what you're bringing in,
Well, part of the grant is we have to have some matching funds from general fund. That has exceeded what used to be. But we wouldn't be able to have any kind of boat patrol at all then if we didn't meet these requirements.
Mr. Mike, helps maintain our boat program. We have three boats that we have access to, and as deputies are out for emergencies, assist the dive team and somebody's in peril in the water. So it's augments our existing program, and I think it's beneficial for everyone in the county to have a boat program. The cities do not, so we assist them as well as needed.
So we get about $30,000 of vessel registration fees. That number went up to 40,000 in 2023, but the grant money went down from, used to be like 15,000 down to 8,000. But we were able to do more boat patrols last year, and they anticipate that it's going to go up to 10,000. So the more patrols we do, the more money they grant us on that one. But it's a pretty small budget. We have to watch
Yeah.
really closely.
but what I'm hearing, I guess, is that we feel it's, or you feel it's beneficial enough for the county to have that, that it's worth kicking in some.
Yeah, to maintain the capability and also just to, serve the citizens out on the waterways.
Okay.
Any questions on that budget? Okay, the next budget is our benefit administration, which is our left one retirees from the sheriff's office that we have an obligation to pay their all medical expenses for them for life. We are down to 14 members. We have three, this is all general fund dollars, but there is its own fund, so we could save for the future. Because if all of them hit a nursing home at one time, we would have to have some money set aside to be able to pay that.
Yeah.
I've anticipated that my youngest is 69 and my oldest is 89 that I'm taking care of right now. And I have a number of them in nursing homes. So I've got, you'll see in there that the contract services, I've increased it from 250 to 310. But then talking with my insurance provider, they gave me a tool to try to anticipate. And so you'll see I increased it to 530,000 in 2025. Maybe we'll need that, maybe we won't. If not, it'll just go back to ending fund balance, but I'll have a number of my 14 will be in their late 70s and 80s by 2025. I imagine at the end, when we don't have 14 members anymore, this is general fund money, and eventually, if there's any left in here, we'll go roll back to the
Yeah.
general fund, because all of it has come from the general fund. We have a transfers in of $300,000 from the budget office into this fund every year.
So this is a benefit that's not offered anymore, and we're just taking care of the grandfather
Mhm.
people. Yeah.
When I started at the sheriff's office, we had 19 members, and we have 14 now.
Yeah.
It seemed to me, excuse me, that the 300K was just a little bit too lean. I mean,
We're making it work, but if we end up with a number of them in a nursing home, we're obligated to pay it, and we may need more than that. But at this
Yeah.
time, we're making it work.
Yeah, and because we've spent less than the 300K, we have a fund balance
Mhm.
also to rely on.
This isn't, Kathy, this isn't it doesn't take into account the money that you've transferred into the other benefit administration fund. Was there a couple $100,000 that you
Yeah,
transferred?
that's different. That one takes care of like unpaid vacation, sick leave that's pay out on terminations. That's in the.
For everybody except the sheriff.
Right,
'cause they're
it's only, yeah, it's just general fund.
But the sheriff's benefit administration is just left one.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so it's limited
yes.
like that.
14 members at this time.
The other budget is in non-departmental and it's general fund, and it's mainly vacation termination pay.
Any questions? Okay, the next one is our sheriff canine program.
When you ask, are there any questions? It might be good to leave a little pause before,
Any questions?
no.
The sheriff has a canine fund. We have 2 canines right now. We transfer from our general fund dollars into here. We also have a number of citizen donations in this fund that we receive. I believe we've received $2,500 already this year from citizens for this fund. We pay for their vet bills and any other costs, but mostly we're saving to replace the dog when they're out of service. And it looks like we will be getting a new dog in 24 and then another one in 25 that they will exceed their time of service and be retired.
It's usually about a 3 or 4 year cycle, or is it 2
I'm not sure of that.
for the dogs?
Their lifespan or?
No, well, I mean, when they're effective, because you said we're replacing.
But what's their life of service?
Yeah.
Oh,
when they-
usually 7 to 8 years for the tracking dogs. The current one we have now is just become disabled and he's 8.5 and we got him when he was about 2. So he had some back issues. So it's probably 7 to 8 years for tracking dogs. Some of the drug sniffing dogs, which is our second dog that we have, they can last quite a while longer.
So it's really a mechanism to save that money and be able to take those citizen donations and put them in there because they want to save for the canines. The next budget that I gave you is the Bearcat, which hasn't been approved yet until next week's board meeting, but I wanted to include. It shows all of the payments from the Longview, Kelso, Kalama, Castle Rock, Woodland, and from the general fund, how much we have in there to pay our bond payments. Do you have a copy of that? Did you give them this? Okay. Kathy hasn't even given you a copy of this until next week when we have the meeting. The next budget is our Department of Emergency Management budget. Emergency Management had 2 budgets. The second budget was their notification system. And at some point, they received a pretty significant amount of money and they created its own fund so they could use that amount of money. But when the new director, Larry Hembry, and I went to go through his budget, that money is no longer enough to even break even in there. And next week on your board agenda, you'll see there's a contract for the notification system. There's about $1,500 that we don't receive enough to pay for the contract. We get $6,000 annually from Pacific Core. And then the bill is over that 7,500 for the notification system. And we're required to have that in place. That does that reverse notifications and a lot of different things. I already put it on the board agenda for next week, so you could see that. So what we did is in the last budget amendment, I worked with Kathy and there wasn't very much money in that fund, maybe 13,000 total. We moved that into this fund just to try to clean up some accounting. And so the only notable difference in this budget is that there's a couple new line items in here that show that money paying for those fees for the notification system. Seemed kind of silly to be transferring $1,500 from one fund to the other fund when there wasn't enough in there anymore. So that we cleaned that up for the accounting purposes at the last budget amendment with Kathy. This contract receives money from all of the cities that does the DEM. So we figure out how many grants they're going to get. They do have 2 different grants they anticipate that they're going to get. And then basically everything else that is owed to them or needs to be to fund that budget. There's a formula with a contract that splits the cost out to all the cities. And then we've put that number in the budget for the revenue. And it's based off of population. It's based off of, I believe, assessed valuation of the cities. And there's a standing contract of how that comes. One thing to note on this budget is all 3 staff in this department are non-represented, and the board hasn't decided that I know of that there's been any cost of living increase yet. So if there's a cost of living increase, then this budget will need to be adjusted with all of the formulas. Right? There's no COLA yet.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the only noticeable difference in this budget. There might be a couple. I don't think there's anything that's very significant in this budget changes. Okay, any questions? Okay.
Why? Why do I see in this summary sheet 900 and some odd thousand for DEM and only 668 or 660-ish?
Because there's been a correction on the sheet with Kathy. The budget sheet you have didn't include all of the ending fund balance. So we've made a correction since that. So my number is correct with the
So the
correct
correct one's on your,
my sheet.
on the front
yes.
sheet.
Yeah, I talked with Kathy and there was some ending fund balance, about $300,000 typo that didn't calculate, and I caught it and got hold of her. Good catch, though. Good question. It's to our favor. We have more money in the bank.
So do we still have a contract with Pacific Corps for law enforcement for deputy?
We do.
Where's that revenue shown?
It's in the sheriff's budget, and it pays for one deputy. It pays for $675 for a uniform allowance, $9,400 for a vehicle. It also does a number of patrols during overtime during the summer, and then for a full deputy. And then it also pays for all their fuel for that deputy. 160, I think, is the purchase order we have with them for 2023
How long is the contract, or is that annual?
annually. The sheriff meets with them annually. They agree upon a number, and then they actually write us a purchase order that they'll pay us that amount of money.
Do we still face the flap all the time? Is that legitimate or not?
Flap in terms of what?
Lots of people say you cannot own your own police force and stuff like that.
Well, that's interesting. Well, it's a multi-year contract with them, but it's required as part of their licensing with FERC they have to provide recreational opportunities and law enforcement. So not only they fund us, the deputy Fish and Wildlife has a full-time person. They also fund the Clark County Sheriff Marine Patrols and Skamania County to a certain extent, but that's part of their licensing agreement. Actually, they're required to do that.
Just for clarity, I never understood why that upsets people, but
Commissioner Weber, I have in the budget 170,000 for 24 and 25 revenue on the sheriff's budget coming in. Another grant that we get is about 98,000. It's for our registered sex offender address verification program. That's also in our budget. We have a clerk that 50% of her wage, and then some supplies are paid to us based on the number of registered sex offenders in the county. And our biggest revenue comes from CRI Just High Crimes. And I'm not sure what that all is, but I get a notice from the treasurers 4 times a year that we get 300.
Is that the burn grant?
No, it's not a grant.
Yeah, that's not federal money, but is that part of the law and justice or state money?
No, it's criminal justice from the counties that they send to the county every year. So we have $1.2 million of revenue that comes in from them every year. The rest of it is like our civil papers being served, our concealed pistol license, as we get the revenue from that. We get some revenue reimbursement from the Washington State Patrol. Every time we fingerprint somebody, we get about $4,000 there. We get some unclaimed property auction evidence, things that we sell. So we don't have a lot of revenue sources, but I did skip over that. I should have went over that.
I never
I'm
did
sorry.
find a notation for Pacific Corps, so on the revenue.
You didn't see it? It's in the revenue side of the sheriff's budget on the first page. And it says salary reimbursement for Pacific Corps. It's 1, 2, 3 lines up on the revenue side of the sheriff's budget,
Right, second
that-
page,
it
second
says-
page or first?
on the first page. It says salary reimbursement for Pacific Corps, but that does include the
Oh,
vehicle.
there it is. Okay,
the
okay,
uniform.
yeah. Sorry about that. And you have, in the revenue side, you have range fees for City Longview and Kelso,
There,
but you also have a separate budget for the range.
correct.
Why
If
is
you-
not that revenue for the sheriff's range?
So in the, I don't believe I have it in here. Yeah, so the range money that we would be normally getting for Crystal Pool has been taken out of this budget. It's not on here.
Oh, that's why it's zeroed
Yeah,
out.
it's
Okay.
zeroed out because I do have it
Alright.
in the range budget that we're going to, I think, next.
I knew there was an explanation.
Yeah. So any other questions? Before we go to the range? Okay, so we do have this new range fund. Thank you for funding that. We've done a lot of work up there. We worked with Sean Rowe and Kathy, and in the last budget amendment, we moved the rest of whatever cash funds was in the fund that he had over to our fund. We've done some estimates of what we think we might have to spend, and we've done some projections of what we think the revenue might come in at with the different entities signing with us to use that range. They're all, at this point, our best guess from what's been used at the Crystal Pool or different discussions that we've had in our office. We'll see, get a good year in there, and we'll see how those projections go. We might have to amend them later, but hopefully that'll be the solid source of revenue. We do have a $1,500 lease payment that we have to make. We do have to pay for, I believe, some garbage and some other items like that. There's some auditor fees. And I think we put 22,000 in our professional service because there are some things they still want to do to improve that as they get up there. So that's where we put the money for that. Do you have any questions?
The construction costs are all last year.
Yes, we do have, most of the entities have signed their user agreement contract, and I'm gonna put them on the board agenda for you probably in 2 weeks. So you'll see that Longview signed, Kelso, Woodland. Actually, I don't think Woodland's the only one we're waiting for. Everybody else has already signed the new agreements to use the new range. So I'll put them on the board agenda so you have them. We're just waiting on Woodland. You have any questions?
Yeah, the construction costs wouldn't be in this budget. They would be where? We were looking at
There
that.
was another budget that's the same number, 41501, but it was a number 075100, and Sean Rowe manages that. So I believe you guys transfer $60,000 into that for CGA's side of it. I think you'll have to talk to Sean Rowe on that. Those are not here, and the original cost that we spent, that's why it just shows no history here, is because it is in his budget. And then whatever was left after we both agreed on the cost, they transferred in a lump sum of dollars into this new budget for us. And then it's the same number, 41501, but the department is now sheriff. So there's 2 different budget numbers there. That's why there's no 22 actuals and things on there. It's a good question. Thank you. Okay, if you have no other questions, we'll jump into our law enforcement records budget. It is a little bit here. I want to point out that they are a part of our sheriff's clerk's budget, and they have not settled their contract either. So the wages will be different once that contract has been settled. With that said, we have after-hours contracts with our neighboring cities to provide after-hours service. Those contracts expire December 31st as well, and they're based on the average cost of a clerk in that department. So I've estimated status quo of where we're at because we don't know what's going to be negotiated. So once that happens, then the revenue will also change in this budget as we go forward there. I don't believe there's much difference in this budget at all. Yeah, everything's pretty much status quo on this budget. Yeah, but this one is funded,
Law enforcement records, right?
yeah, law
Mhm.
enforcement records.
So 22, we were at 1,030,000. 23, we're at 500,000. 24, we're at 1.8, almost 1.9 million.
So we have a new FTE in this department.
Except a 500,000 is half a year.
That includes fund
Okay.
balance.
Yes, this number at the bottom
Okay.
includes the
Okay,
fund
yep,
balance.
yeah, yeah.
But we do
Okay.
have a new FTE in there that the board has authorized. That's already been in there for this year. I believe in February, you authorized that. And then the year before that, we came to you and you authorized to have a manager in that department again. There hadn't been a manager. So some of that cost has been increased over 2022.
You remember the date when the city of Longview moved out of here?
I'll bet-
July 1st, 2019,
2019.
I believe. So. Yeah.
Oh, time flies. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
In hindsight, from our perspective, county perspective, did that end up decreasing our or increasing our cost, I should say?
Well, actually, I misspoke. July 1, 2019 is when we took over records. It had been under Department of Corrections. It was the following year. I think it was August of 2022.
2022, okay, that sounds about right.
21, August of 21. We entered into after hours contracts with all the cities to offset some of that. So we do have contracts from them, but I do believe we probably, maybe Katrina can speak to have we had to pick up more of the cost? I think that was what you're getting at of the records department since
Okay.
that time.
The reason I asked was because I look at that without the political boundary to it, and it seemed like having it under one house would make it more efficient. And my guess is collectively, or I should say, split out now, it costs the taxpayer a little bit higher than it was before. Just a guess.
I suspect, I guess a big part of that would be Longview. They form their own records division, which I believe have about 6 FTEs. So collectively, there's more people employed
Yeah.
doing that work than there were prior.
Yeah, okay.
So the funding for law records is these after hours contracts first. Then whatever else it costs to run that department, the cost is split between the general fund and law and justice fund. So law and justice fund pays 9.1% of that, and then the general fund pays the difference. So in 2024, general fund is contributing $863,000 to law and justice, to the law records fund. And law and justice is putting in $76,000. And then we have one more law records budget. And this one we've split out, and it's separate because we split out all the costs that has to do with our Spillman software. And we have contracts with all of the cities because it all comes through the sheriff's office, and then we bill back out to the cities for the contract services and for Spillman. So it's a pretty small budget. But the revenue comes in from all different entities to pay for different things. So again, this one, we take the Spillman contracts from the cities, find out what revenue is there, and then whatever is left to run the budget is billed to the county, and the general fund contributes 51,000 and 52,000 for the next 2 years. And then law and justice also contributes. They're going to contribute 4,500 and 4,600, just a formula that was in place for quite a few years on there. But there's not any significant changes to that one either. And that is all I have. Unless you have some questions. I know we have a lot of questions here.
I do have some overall statements and maybe questions. On your front sheet, I thought I had that marked. I do. You show a $423,000 increase from 23 over to 24. And at first I was like, oh my God, what's going on here? But you look at the numbers, that's 2.5%. And in a current atmosphere, I'm like, okay. And then about the boat there, personally, I'm glad we have the boat. And I remember it was a pretty expensive item and it's a very good boat. Sometime maybe you can give us a little report on its activities or what's been done. It's not necessary, it'd just be interesting. And I think we have to meet about the COLA. And I assume that we would do that in executive session.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then the more difficult one that I postponed till the end is I really was, and haven't gotten anything contrary to feeling really uncomfortable about the behavioral health team. I've heard them speak on 2 occasions for different situations and they make it seem like they want to be another welfare arm. And I know when I was involved with authorizing this, I really did want the staff to report directly to the sheriff's office. That turned out that the sheriff's option, but maybe others say, no, that doesn't make sense because I don't know anything about mental health. I swallowed that, but my impression was that there'd be events at which someone needed mental health expertise. And a person would go there and essentially at the end of maybe an hour or 3 hours or 4 hours, however long it took for that particular incident to be closed off. But that's not what these people have expressed in those two meetings. And so I know it's a little early to get an efficiency report and all that, but I would like us to consider reducing from 4 to 1 person and just see if we can effectively make that fit under the picture I thought before. Maybe I should be talked up to 2, but I really want to protect the public and the sheriff, but I want to do that in a reasonable way. I don't want to create another welfare system. And I think that's what's in place now.
Well, I'd say I think 1 would be difficult to really be effective at the very least. I think it'd be important to have 2, to have somebody available every day of the week would be good. No, we send them out as a pair and that relieves the deputy of being there. I'd be uncomfortable sending 1 person out by themselves in most cases. And in terms of their contacts with people, in some cases they can have 1 contact with them, maybe refer them to services and be done. There's other cases where people, lack of a better term, need babysitting. They have a lifelong issues they're dealing with and our workers can't solve their problems in one day or 1 meeting. Sometimes it takes ongoing involvement, whether it's our team or other professionals. There's, as you know, there's people that need lifelong.
Yeah,
support and help.
but that's the point. I don't think it's proper for the sheriff's office to take on that obligation. And we've got lots of resources that we can hand somebody off to.
Well, that's the intent of the program, to get them plugged into services. They wouldn't have this ongoing
Yeah.
relationship with people, though that doesn't necessarily happen in like a one and done scenario.
I'm on the board for the BHO and ASO, and I see in there, they've even gotten mandates from the state that they cannot accommodate because they cannot hire enough of the people that we have tied up there. So I even that argument would lend me to say we're not talking about dispatching somebody and saying, you're gonna lose your job. Those people are in high demand. But because of the way they look at things and the way the BHO and ASO responsibilities are, that's a much closer match there than what we have at the sheriff's office. Just my opinion on that.
We have one more presentation, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is the boat the one I saw at Castle Rock? For the National Night Out?
Well, we have
Is
three.
that the boat?
We
Yeah,
have
that's,
three. Yeah,
oh, you have three.
we have
okay.
three different ones.
Yeah, that was a beauty. Yeah. Might have to steal a ride someday.
That new boat is the one that's got the internal pump. It can go up a really shallow.
Yes, that's the newest one we have is a Rogue
Yeah.
boat. So yeah, we could arrange that. If you get your numbers, we'll call you out in the middle of the night when the
Yeah.
next time they go. So you want to go? so.
I'll go. I'll go.
Okay.
Okay, the next presentation is Office of Public Defender. You can sit here with me. That way I can help you. if there's-
I think they were part of the sheriff. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
Still sometimes do I did bring one extra form to run over with commissioners. And this is just a case report of cases filed by county, cases closed by county across the state.
Metrics.
Metrics. It's a good.
And we all the cases are identical.
Right, yes, every case is the same, that's right. This case is filed, cases.
Thank you.
closed.
This is just public defense or is this everybody?
Keep those in order, so I don't.
Okay.
Okay, so I can get to that, or we can start there wherever commissioners would like to go. Might as well go over this first, okay. So what I've done is just highlighted a couple. I highlighted Cowles County, of course, first to see that in calendar year 2022. And I should just step back and say too, my prerogative really since taking over as the director at the Office of Public Defense is to streamline our office strictly for criminal trial court level service. That's what I've always viewed the Office of Public Defense as providing. I think for a while there, we might have gotten into the weeds with expansion into civil practice. Which is once you kind of take that on, you would see a need to increase our staff probably twofold. Just because you're getting into child dependencies, family law, child support enforcement, all sorts of things that just really are not under the purview, in my opinion, of a public defender's office. So since I've been there, we've kind of refocused on the trial level, which is the sheriffs that were just here arresting somebody, putting forward a probable cause statement, prosecuting attorney making a charging decision, filing charges, and therefore you are, by our Constitution, both state and federal, afforded a public defense attorney if you can't afford one. So what we see in that first category with criminal at the top is actual criminal filings that made it to an arraignment. So to your initial court appearance where you have to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. So you see there, 1,331 such cases were filed in 2022. Under the juvenile offender, you'll see 206 were. And then if you flip to the next page, just to note, you'll see I highlighted Similar numbers, counties with similar filing, that would be Snohomish. Again, we had just over 1,300. Snohomish County had 1,500 plus, closer to 1,600. Thurston County less, 1,224, and Whatcom County kind of nearby at 1,476. The interesting thing to note, and I think you commissioners are probably much more aware of this than me, the difference between Cowlitz County, Snohomish, Thurston, and Whatcom is population. So even though we're right in the same area as far as criminal filings, Snohomish County has 722,000 more citizens in the county. Thurston County has 186,000 more folks living there, and Whatcom County has 117,000 more people living in it. So despite the fact that our population is much less, meaning our public defender's office is also much less staffed, we're right up there with those counties with how many cases we're handling. So we have a large caseload. Our prosecutor's office has made it seemingly clear that they're going to charge a lot of felonies, and our public defender's office is answering the call, in my opinion. That's, I think, evidenced by the second thing that I've handed forward, which was the cases resolved. Yes, I can pause.
This is a ratio number, so we can always play with the numerator or the denominator.
This is not ratio. This is actual cases filed.
No, I understand, but when I compare Cowlitz to
Oh,
Snohomish, it's
yes.
I can decide that we are overcharging or they're undercharging or we got our population numbers wrong. Well, actually, we don't. I'm sure. So this to me is actually a very interesting piece of data that, you know, we've got to find solutions, and you made a statement that would lead me to think that you think that we're possibly overcharging. And I don't know if you meant that, but I think finding an explanation is really a useful thing to do.
And I would not posit that I have an explanation why the numbers are what they are.
So let me ask it in a more, well, maybe I should let you continue and then
I'm fine going down that rabbit hole, so to speak. I mean, it's an interesting number to look at. My experience prior to Cowlitz County was in Virginia, where there is a grand jury. It's an entirely different process to bring forward criminal charges. So this is really my experience is our local community. It's you'll see, just as an aside, you'll see King County's actually listed as zeros across the board. I don't know if that's because they have more filings than they can even count, or if they just failed to take part in the Supreme Court statistic taking, but
My understanding is that their jail cells are actually the sidewalks.
yes.
Yeah.
Not sure what the answer for that is, but
I was going to ask you what I think is probably an unfair statement. And so if you don't answer it, I completely appreciate that, which is I have a lot of respect for how you're doing your job. And I know that you've got some insights that I possibly can't have because I'm not sitting in there and having that constant and broad view of things. Are we, so the difficult question is, are we overcharging? In your opinion, you don't have to
in
defend.
my opinion, there are discretionary choices being made right now uniformly by our prosecutor's office that I don't think are being made in other counties. And I can give you an example of that.
Okay,
If you have been trespassed for shoplifting, say food, say you need to get a meal, you don't have any money, you steal a piece of pizza from a local retail store, grocery store, and they catch you, what they do is they serve you with a trespass notice. You cannot come back here. If you go back there and do the same thing, you might be stealing item less than $1 in value, but you'll be charged with a felony. Because now you have re-entered the premises was actually the essential elements for a burglary. So instead of being charged with shoplifting or a theft in the 3rd degree, which would meet the standard, you're charged with a 2nd-degree burglary. So that is uniform in Cowlitz County, that anytime somebody does that, they're charged with a felony. And I do not believe, and I do stay in contact with directors of other public defender's office in the county or in the state. I don't believe there are other prosecutor's office that charge so strongly on that, so uniformly on that. It's kind of a discretionary choice. What's the value of what was taken, what harm done versus the expense of charging this person with a felony? If you have criminal history and you get charged with a burglary in the 2nd degree, there's a good likelihood you go to prison. So then the cost of that as well, I think, weighs into charging decisions elsewhere. Where here, I don't know if you saw the statistic not that long ago, but per capita, Cowlitz County is actually 3rd in the state for imprisoning people. So
You answered this question like a public defender, right?
that's the goal.
Yeah. So if we're overcharging, do you have any sense, are we talking about 50% of the cases there? Or are we talking
I don't have that statistic.
just a field?
A feeling, I would say it's probably closer to about 20 to 25%.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
But and I'm the individual too, every day that when people are arrested, you have a first appearance within 24 hours of your arrest. I read every single probable cause statement that's filed. So I have a pretty good sense of what's
Yeah.
being filed on a daily basis.
I appreciate those answers. Thank you.
And then and any other questions?
So one of the interesting statistics that I have noticed about Cowlitz County is that about 1/3 of the population qualifies for Medicaid because they're within 200% of poverty. That's the boundary for aid to folks with low incomes. And it's not 100% absolute, but there's a pretty strong correlation between poverty and lawlessness.
It's
And
a fact, yes.
and my impression has been it's part of the legacy of having been a mill town where the mills no longer hire nearly as many. You've got a lot of families whose family culture is still grappling with the changed world that they weren't prepared for. And part of that results in you feel better by artificial medication or self-medicating, or
Yes.
you're engaged in helping others
There's also
feel better. So
universal research on the impact of making somebody a felon and the impact on the people in that nuclear family. The odds of a juvenile whose parent goes to prison, of them becoming imprisoned in a juvenile, exponentially increased. So if the status quo is impoverished individuals being sent to prison, the recidivism risk and the growth, it just feeds on itself.
So an interesting comparison could be looking at other counties' Medicaid rate, percentage rates, and those numbers are really hard to come up with. But surprisingly, the behavioral health organizations get those figures.
Right.
And so my guess is Kitsap County might not be a good comparator.
We often use Kitsap, I think.
Yeah, and
as
it's a bigger population, but
I think based on population.
I think their economics is different. It's just different than ours.
I think so.
Um,
That's fair to say.
Franklin County might be a little bit closer to that poverty level, but I don't know.
And that's something I've not researched,
Yeah.
the impact of the poverty level on those counties and their finances.
Well, yeah, I think that completely understandable. That's not your job.
Right.
Yeah.
But I do take interest in it. I mean.
Oh, yeah.
There's answers to the questions that these numbers present, and it's just out there to be figured out. The next document I gave the commissioners is the cases resolved, which obviously directly correlates to filing. There's been a lot of talk about the backlog that was created when COVID pretty much shut down trials. Trials really served as the force that resolves cases. Not many cases go to trial. The vast majority resolve. The ceiling, the wall, whatever you want to say, is trial. It serves as the deadline for a defendant to make a decision how they want to resolve their case or seek trial. So this number here, you'll see for 2022 was 1,050. That's in the year 2022, the courts were open. A much higher ratio of completed cases in juvenile court. And I do think we have a very good juvenile defense attorney there right now. So she's a big part of that. In comparison to other counties too, that I used for the filing statistics, you'll see we are closing at a very high rate as well. And that's the answer. There's a lot of questions about how do we get rid of this backlog? It's simply doing the work. That's not a very popular answer, but it will fix it. We are working at a rate of speed. We're gonna catch up. It's just a matter of time. It's a matter of, I think our judges now setting firm dates for court trials to take place, not moving them, not moving the goalposts, enforcing trial, and it's leading to case resolutions.
So in 2022, if you took a look at total filings, so civil and criminal,
Yes.
you're resolving 90%. I'm a little bit surprised. I
Right.
thought the backlog was worse than that, although that's 1 year in, 1 year out.
Exactly. And-
So you
and
don't know
we're-
which ones are on their third or fourth year waiting in the queue.
Exactly. That's what's not really reflected well in the numbers is the amount of cases that are still pending. I myself still carry a caseload. I have cases going back to early 2021 still.
Mhm.
So I mean, there are some that are difficult. Clients go on warrant status, maybe get arrested in another state, and it takes them to serve a sentence or be transferred before they get back here to resolve the case. So there's still a backlog that exists for other reasons, but the active cases are getting resolved. So I think that's something of note.
So in that case, a backlog could be something that is really pending right now, the county doing something, or it could be someone who's out of the county or
Yes.
just, so it's not necessarily our fault.
It's not, it's a mix. It's a mix of things. There's some folks that have complicated cases. Some of the more serious charges require extensive preparation for trial, murder cases and the like. Those can take over a year to get to trial, but there's also from the backlog. I have unfortunately people that have passed away and I'm still waiting on proof of a death certificate or something before we can actually close their case. So their cases still remain open. They count in the books as part of the backlog until they're otherwise resolved.
So the
And we've had
backlog-
some competency hearing issues as
There's a
well. as,
huge-
uh,
There's a huge. chunk
People are
of cases-
hospitalized
Yep.
to get fixed. and
Once
that takes a
somebody's
while.
deemed not to be competent to stand trial, if they are out of custody right now, DSHS is not assisting in restoration treatment. So they continue to make court dates if they're lucky. A lot of these individuals with mental health issues don't make court dates, go through the whole rigmarole of getting arrested, appearing again, they're still not competent, set dates and so forth. And that's a whole nother issue. Working with the jail on that, but it's a problem. I don't have an answer for that either.
Yeah.
DSHS was fully staffed, it would be a different story. There was a time, but that's not the current status of Western State Hospital.
Yeah. So what I'm inferring from these numbers, we're not really adding to the backlog.
Currently, no.
We're doing enough to chip away.
Yes,
And there's certain things that are just gonna sit there because they're
Stuck in.
they're kind of stuck, no death certificate, for
they're
example.
not
or- yeah.
backlog related, yeah. There's definite progress and it's a catch-up game. So I mean, with time, we will catch up at this rate. It's just keeping my office staffed and hiring people that are trial ready and able to fill that need if necessary, but otherwise resolve a case short of trial.
So I'm curious about strategies to help recruit lawyers.
Yes.
We don't have a whole lot of tools, but I've heard suggestions that helping with college loan debt might be useful. Have you heard if anybody's doing that, or is that just one of those, we wish we could if the law would allow us?
It's a wish we could situation. When I was looking at job prospects post law school, a part of my decision to become a public defender was there is in Washington State, a 10-year public works student loan forgiveness program. So if you do if you maybe 5 years in the prosecutor's office, 5 years in the public defender's office, you can have your entire student loan debt forgiven. I'm on almost there. So I mean, that's a huge selling point.
Okay, so they already have that option.
Yes, and in speaking with my counterpart, Mr. Jurvakainen, I have a huge question of what law school graduates are doing this day and age, because I guess I'm old enough to say back in my day, but back when I graduated, I would say the vast majority, 75% of the people I graduated law school with either became a prosecutor or a public defender. I mean, it was just, there was a need, there's the need that is right now. And people went into that to cut their teeth, learn how to work in a courtroom, a steady government job. And we are just not, I just don't know where they're going now. They're just not applying for these positions. So I mean, that is something I of course bring up with any applicant. Student loan forgiveness, 10 years is a long time. So I mean, if it were a shorter period of time, that'd be one thing. The person that hired me made me I had to make an oral agreement that I would work for the office for 5 years. So that was one way to go about it, but that's hardly enforceable.
Yeah.
So it is a problem. Employing attorneys fresh out of law school or even with some experience is difficult right now.
Depending on honor is not sufficient.
Yeah.
Seemingly no. No.
It makes me wonder at times if some of them aren't going, operating a business, these corporations, as more and more laws and just human resource laws and all this stuff, they almost don't make a move without an attorney. And I think if they maybe are starting departments, I wonder,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's the usual thing where people who knew people or their father maybe was a partner, they went into that
Yeah.
firm, but that was the minority, not the
Yeah.
majority, so. Just keep plugging along though. We're trying to get our name out there to the local law schools. We definitely have interns that come in from the law schools. Try to sell them on what we have to offer, the fact they can afford a house in this area versus Portland or Seattle, where they might otherwise be drawn, but that's for certain. The other statistic I was going to just run by the commissioners to let you know what we're really doing at the Office of Public Defense too, as far as tackling, yes, this backlog, and I think in an efficient way, is I was going to point out jury trials, which is something that I pride myself on. I think it's a great skill to have as an attorney. It's really the fun of the job is a jury trial. The numbers were in for 2022 and Cowlitz County. We have the sixth most criminal jury trials completed in 2022. So it's still being done here. It's crazy sometimes to look at the numbers in other counties. I don't know what they're doing to not get cases resolved, but trial is not a high number across the state. In Cowlitz County it is. So we're still using that function. We're still getting people to trial when that's their choice. And that of course is their constitutional right to face your accusers and have a jury decide your fate, so to speak. And we're getting there as well. So that's one other stat I wanted to run by you. And the counties ahead of us are highly populated counties. Snohomish, Spokane, Yakima, and Clark.
And it seems like even in the day and age of Zoom trials,
Right.
how do you
had a
get your
couple-
Perry Mason moment in a Zoom trial? You,
I had to get on a soapbox when that was being proposed, when we were doing trials at the Expo Center. And it's, I mean, that's the ultimate affront to facing your accusers, is that someone could appear on a screen and,
yeah,
you know, say you did it. So we didn't, unfortunately, we never got there in Cowles County. So then that's my presentation on kind of what we're doing at OPD. As far as the budget, of course, that's why I'm here. I've put forward a budget that does increase my request by 3.35% compared to 2023. Just trending back to since I was kind of in charge and then officially appointed, we have come under budget every year. In 2023, we're projected to be 18.9% under budget. In 2022, we were 17.6% under budget. In 2021, we are 15.6% under budget. Part of that has been a staffing issue, but other than that, I think I'd like to say it's kind of proof that we are being responsible with our allotted funds. We take that seriously. We have tried to increase our use of private investigators as an office, and I think that's a crucial part of doing our due diligence for our clients. But with that and inflation obviously being reflective, there are no real major changes in my kind of line items in my requests, just a slight increase on cell phones due to the fact that I did create a new deputy director position, and our DUI phone that we have to be handling was a flip phone. So we have advanced now to an iPhone. So there's just a couple.
I thought they were going back to flip phones.
Yeah, yes, they're coming back, but it had very poor service. So we did increase our budget there. We also increased the legal research database that we use. It's still Westlaw, but it's a higher end Westlaw. It's very good for quick research. So some minor increases there, but again, nothing outside of what we've been using and working with in the past.
So the, excuse me, the budget numbers I see for 24 and 25, then do I believe them, or are these also going to be 15% underruns?
Well, if I got fully staffed, I'd like to say we'd be closer
Yeah.
to the budget, but
I'm looking at Kathy in this
Yes.
case.
Yeah,
No, no,
I agree with his
I'm being
comment.
insolent.
If he's fully staffed, he's going to come in very close to his budget numbers. Yes.
Okay, and the reasons you had underruns before you weren't trying to game the system, you just couldn't win
right.
the staff you needed.
And again, also in years past, I do believe COVID had an effect on the 2021 under budget, because we spend money on private investigators. We
Yeah.
spend money on displays and exhibits for trial that we're not utilizing. We were lucky if we got a trial a month at the Expo Center.
Yeah.
So just a couple things affecting that. Fully staffed though, I do think we've been under budget. It's just
So-
shortened.
So how long have you been running the show over there?
It's a funny question. I'll answer it seriously. So I think I was appointed to the directorship in March of 2021.
21.
Yes, so going on my second year.
I would have guessed a different year.
I was helping before that.
Yeah.
Well, in my memory, the years just kind of blend.
Yeah, right. Yes, I do.
We go back a little ways.
one question on you talk about fully staffed, and it brought up the question. I know you had a person there that you got through a grant, and you felt like they've really helped streamline some things or really help with your efficiency. Is that person in here? Because I don't remember when that grant comes out or ends?
That person is no longer with our office, but
Oh.
we did utilize them for about a year and a half after we took them on as a full-time employee. It's a stressful job, and for some folks, they find pretty much the trauma of maybe the victim in your case or your own client or
Okay.
something that just becomes too much to bear.
So we've already made that adjustment for that.
Yes, we have.
Okay,
Yeah. And for the Blake work, and that's the grant that was utilized for that individual. Because of staffing, we're not utilizing a Blake grant for our staffing. We've actually allowed OPD to contract their own Blake person for Callis County cases. So we are not, we don't have an employee paid for by the Blake grant in 2024. State
Okay.
OPD will be handling resentencings and so forth for that. It's kind of a analogous to the backlog that I was talking about for Superior Court. There was a lot at the beginning. Obviously, Blake was a big change. And those cases came, they were processed, they went, and now it's more of a trickle. It's not nearly as many folks, so the need isn't there. And if I found an attorney who wanted to be a Blake attorney, I would hopefully talk them into just being a full-time.
Yeah,
attorney
okay.
in my office.
I just kind of remember, I think when I first came on board, you had this person, you didn't want to lose them.
Right,
And if you didn't get the grant, but it sounds like that's been worked out.
that's
so,
been worked out.
Yeah,
Of the number of employees listed, 23 or 24, how many of those, well, for 24, for 2024, that number would be 24?
Yes, that's correct.
And of that, how many are attorneys?
We currently now have 14. I'm not counting myself in that number.
So, and the other 10 are going to be office assistants, help and so forth.
And paralegals, yes.
One of the reasons I ask is there's quite a. No, I've missed something. I take that back.
I've
thing I
noticed in
didn't say.
your, I've noticed in your narrative, you've used the prosecutor's office as a mark, as a goal to try to balance that staff mix.
Yes.
So that you better match the folks you're up against on a regular basis.
In talking with a lot of directors across the state, it's the best measure for our work. As soon as we fall behind in number of attorneys, support staff, that's when the quality of criminal defense, our jobs, that's when it starts to slip. So I really am using the prosecutor's office across the street that I know well as a mirror image of what we need to stay kind of in companionship with.
So discounting Blake, how much does the state support your office operations, your department?
Now that they're going to start come January 2024, Blake all by themselves.
Right.
And I don't want to besmirch anybody, but less. Well, I would say less than they have in the past.
In Wasac, there's been an effort for the past several years to try to increase the state's commitment. Because counties that fully fund public defense, there are several counties that just simply don't have the resources. And so the level of justice is just different.
Right.
It's not as good. It's justice by zip code. Because Wakaika, for example, they don't have very many people, and that's true, but
Right.
they have even less of their budget from property taxes. And they can't offer as robust a service. The figure we've been told for Washington State is 4%.
And that's 4.
4% from the state to counties, public defense. I think Mississippi is the only other state that's lower.
That's a very low number.
Yeah. Yeah, so. Anyway,
And if there were.
although as my colleagues say, it's still the taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
But there's more tax being generated up north than there is down in some counties. They don't hesitate to share the rules and regulations statewide.
Yeah.
They want to share the revenue. More, anyway. Okay. I don't have any other questions.
No. Appreciate I like Commissioner Mortensen. I appreciated those stats.
Okay, and I
Yeah.
mean, I'm happy to research too, the socio-economic
Yeah.
portion of it. It's kind of an interesting note.
Yeah. I am surprised that those statistics that you came up with weren't part of the package we were presented in the arguments for a sixth judge. Surprise, huh?
But yeah. I felt like I learned something sitting here. for
I try.
this. Yeah, so I appreciate that. Of
course. Thank you.
And our battery is just about dead on our little, it's on low power.
But that's our rev limiter. It says we've been here long enough.
That's right, that's right. Well, it's been on since 9 o'clock this morning.
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Okay, and then tomorrow we have additional budget workshops at, I think, 1:30.
Yeah. Do you want these back?
Yes,
'Cause
we're
you're
gonna
gonna add
take your
some
books
stuff to
back
them?
because we're gonna add all the tabs for tomorrow.
Okay.
And that's all I have for today.
Anything else, gentlemen?
Nope.
I think we've had a day, huh? Yeah. Okay. Thank
See you
you.
tomorrow at 1:30, yeah?
Yeah, and we are adjourned. Thank you.